So she was a pretty shaken up ship. And she came back for a major refit. And she was there from, well, I joined it in October. It had been there about a month then. There was dockyard workers all on it when I went on board. And the about 300 new entries went on to the Perth, and they got rid of a lot of their old hands. And I was there for a couple of weeks, and then they transferred us to an army camp in Ingleburn to get us off the ship, I think, about 50 of us. And we were there for that time, and then we came back to the Perth. And after the refit was completed, it did its trials and all that, and we were then engaged as a ship, a seagoing ship, on convoy duties around the west-east Australian coast, between Southern Ocean and the Brisbane area, I suppose. We were engaged with other Australian warships. And we did that right up until about February of 1941. I've got the dates wrong there too. 1941. No, February 1942, I'm sorry. And we were then sent to Fremantle, which happened, we went there soon after the Sydney had been sunk in the previous November. So we probably went over there initially to take over her patrols. But in the interim, Singapore was falling, and the Perth then got direct orders, once she got to Fremantle, to go up to Java to participate in what was known as the Abdar force up there then, which was a force of Australian, British, Dutch and
American.
Australian, British, Dutch and
The Americans.
Forces to help the Dutch with their threat from the Japan at that time. After Singapore fell, the Japanese immediately started to head towards Java, to invade Java. So the Perth got involved in that, and our first action took place when we joined other ships of Abdar force in Surabaya. And in Surabaya we joined, there was about 14 ships in our group, 3 or 4 or 5 cruisers, English, Dutch and American, and the Perth, and half a dozen odd destroyers from America and England and Dutch. We were engaged from 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We made contact with the enemy in what became known as the Java Sea Battle. And we were in battle then with that force of a comparable number of Japanese ships of a similar sizes, protecting a convoy that was invading Surabaya, or was scheduled to invade Surabaya. We got a bit of a thrashing in that battle. We'd not had any experience in a battle as a group. We had no simple signalling procedures between ships. No ships had aircraft on them that were serviceable. The Exeter was hit very early in the action, and she was knocked out of the battle when her engine got shell through it, and she had to withdraw. Then a Dutch destroyer was sunk, and a British destroyer was sent with the Exeter to go back to Surabaya and escort her back. So our force had been depleted a little bit. Anyway, we battled on for the rest of that afternoon, and during that time we lost the Jupiter and the Encounter, I think it was, no, the Electra. The Electra and the Jupiter, which were 2 British destroyers, they were lost. The Jupiter hit a mine, and the Electra got hit in a gun action with the Japanese destroyers. By nightfall, we sort of stood looking at one another for half an hour, I suppose, sort of reforming ourselves, the Japs and us. Anyway, the night action started around about 7 o'clock in the evening, and we battled on then for another 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours, before the Java and the De Ruyter, which were 2 Dutch cruisers, were both sunk by torpedoes, and they were sunk very quickly. The Perth and the Houston were the only 2 remaining ships out of all of our squadron who were still workable. We had not suffered any damage. The Perth, the Houston only received one shell that went through the bow and went out the other side without exploding. So apart from that damage to her, both of our ships were still serviceable. And our captain, who was then the senior officer of the two ships, was put in command of them, and we returned to Batavia to refuel and rearm if we could, because we'd used up most of our ammunition, 6-inch ammunition. Similarly, the Houston, the American cruiser, had used up her 8-inch ammunition. Anyway, we couldn't take on much in the way of ammunition in Java, in Batavia, and very little fuel. Our captain received orders from the commander of the naval forces in Batavia that we were to proceed to south to Jelapjap on the south side of Java, or if we weren't any successful there in picking up anyone, carry on to either Fremantle or Colombo. So they were our sort of sailing orders when we left Batavia at about 7 p.m. in the evening, heading for Sunda Strait. We about 11 o'clock at night, we were sailing along, getting along nicely, and we challenged a Japanese destroyer which we'd seen, and she gave the wrong signal in reply. So our captain immediately opened fire on the destroyer, and she returned the fire and fired torpedoes at us and turned around and shot off. So then the battle was on of the Sunda Strait started at about 11 o'clock at night. And soon after we engaged this Japanese destroyer, we found that we were surrounded by a Japanese convoy of 50 or 60 transport ships that were then involved in landing troops on Java in what was known as Bantam Bay. And they were protected by a force of Japanese warships comprising of about 12 or more destroyers, 2 or 3 cruisers and a couple of very heavy cruisers further back. And so the battle started in royal time then. We were completely outnumbered, completely surrounded as it were, because we were sailed around into this Bantam Bay. Oh. And strangely enough, we're pretty sure a couple of the torpedoes from the Dutch, the Japanese destroyer that were fired at us, missed us and hit their transports, because there was a few of them sunk in the beach where they were landing. Oh. Now we did fire our torpedoes. We had 8 torpedoes on the Perth, and we fired both sides of port and starboard, 4 on each side. We fired all of our torpedoes. I don't know whether we hit anything, but we would have discharged some of those transports that were lined up, and then we would have discharged the other side at probably ships running around firing at us. So whether we hit anything with destroyed with our torpedoes, I don't know. But I do know on the 4-inch gun deck, which was my action station, we were engaged all the time, shooting at whatever we could see. We were in what was called, we're out of controlled fire, because there was just too many ships to put our guns onto the one we had them on each ship. So we were all in local control on all of our guns, both 6-inch and 4-inch. They were all firing locally over their own sites. And that's how the battle went on for almost an hour. And then we were hit by the first torpedo, which hit us in the forward engine room on the starboard side. And that killed every man in the engine room. Soon after, another few minutes later, we were hit by another torpedo, again on the starboard side. And I think then the captain gave the abandoned ship order, or prepare to abandon ship first. And then after the second torpedo,